TLDR, 3 years past DDAY, and I am struggling with moving on from an emotional affair my partner had. He has made a genuine effort to do better in ways that most BP could only dream of. I'm wondering if I should just cut my losses and start fresh, or if it's worth it to figure things out. WWID, the story goes like this. In 2022 ago, my 24F boyfriend, 24 million, had a 2-week emotional affair with his housemate 1.5-ish years into our relationship. Towards the end of April 2022, we had hit a really rough patch in our relationship where we were heading on the path to taking a break due to our communication issues and general misalignment, which we didn't end up doing. Around this time, he moved in with a longtime friend of his and her husband because they were subletting rooms in their new home. He didn't tell me who the other subletters were, and I came to find out that it was 2 other women our age/slightly older. It upset me that he omitted this fact when describing his living situation, which just further put a strain on us at the time. He and AP became great friends really fast behind closed doors, and then he started living a double life. I don't really know how he had the time to do that because he was talking to me at work, or seeing me the majority of the time, even though our relationship was kind of falling apart. A couple days into May, he became kind of distant and less willing to fight for our relationship triangular flag, but we decided eventually that we were going to work it out. The night I found out, there were 2 things that really tipped me off. One, he came over to my dorm to watch The Ultimatum, and he made a strange comment in response to something I said about cheating being unforgivable that made me think, huh. And 2, he kept calling me this weird phrase that he has never said before, which I would later find out was her contact name in his phone. That night when we went to bed, something in my dreams was telling me to go through his stuff. So of course, I went through his texts. We had an open phone policy to find a partially deleted text thread with the weird phrase he kept saying as her contact name. The convos looked strangely incomplete, so I did what any sane person would do and went through his Apple Watch. Lo and behold, everything came out. When I tell you I went blind with rage after finding their entire conversation. The MF wasn't even smart enough to delete it from his watch. I honestly blacked out. I called her and unleashed a slew of heinous insults and kicked him the fuck out after some seriously sinister words. The 2 of them had been constantly hanging out at home late at night, watching movies, playing video games, and essentially doing everything that we did together. Honestly, the one saving grace of it all was that there wasn't anything sexual in the messages, and they had never done anything physical, per one of the most recent messages from her, saying their mutual friend wouldn't be mad about them being together because they had never done anything. But to make a long story short, he had essentially found a replacement and monkey branched me. He would text us the same things, and they would do everything we did together whenever he wasn't with me. In their messages, she would absolutely gush over him, telling him how incredible he was and how much she loved spending time with him. She even went so far as to say that if my boyfriend and I ended up working it out, she would love to continue being his friend and roommate. This was perfect for him because his love language is words of affirmation, and she played right into that. There were times he told her that we were going to work it out, but it was very clear that he enjoyed her company and attention in a more than just a friend way. Had we broken up in a clean manner without me finding out, I think he would have considered moving forward. Honestly, I think it was all the perfect shitstorm of events that led to that happening. While I don't at all blame myself, I do see the convenience of the situation. As much as I hate her, sometimes I feel bad for her because he truly just lied to both of us. The problem, fast forward to now, we're still together and live together, but it weighs on me frequently, and every year towards the end of April/May my body is just in constant fight or flight mode. Initially, I think I stayed because I feared being alone as I didn't really have many friends, We were codependent and most of all spite. I wanted to spite him and AP. Staying with me ensured they could not be together, and that revenge was enough because they wanted to remain in each other's lives as friends. He moved out, removed all contact with her, and cut contact with the homie-outing friend who kind of egged it on, and that was it. This came at great financial cost to him too, so it was interesting to see him put his money where his mouth was even when it low-key bankrupted him. We ended up taking a brief break for 2 weeks when I went home because my mother thought I was going to kill myself, which I definitely considered from how awful of an experience it was. It wasn't really a break, though, since we didn't fully do no contact. In terms of reconciliation, he's unfortunately been an incredible partner, which makes this even harder. For 3 years, he's respected every boundary I reinstated after that, goes to therapy, never pressures me into moving on from what happened, answers every question I have with the whole truth, goes above and beyond to care for me, never blames me. There's never anything remotely worrying across his devices. Maybe he's gotten better at hiding things, but I like to think I'm pretty exceptional at snooping, so it's possible he just hasn't done anything. We have had many long and hard conversations in which he reassures me without self-pity and reaffirms his commitment to our future. In terms of the reconciliation partner people would want given the circumstances, and what all of these cheating books tell you, he is as close to that as it gets. Honestly, it gets annoying at times because he could have just done this from the start without the cheating. Aside from this 2-week stint, we have a solid relationship, not factoring in my trust issues. Even after removing him from the pedestal in my mind after that happened and no longer caring about his potential, he still is an objectively nice person to be around, and I like him, sue me. What hurt most about their flirtatious 2 weeks is that I, with an individuality complex, Aquarius, could be so easily replaceable to him. It was a massive blow to the ego to see who he had chosen, as she was, to put it nicely, a loser. That's not even me being biased. Obviously, I know what he did has nothing to with me and everything to do with him, but oh my God, that's the best you could do. Additionally, knowing what he is capable of haunts me. This was a big all-reality check for me to see him as he really was/is. If the roles were reversed and I felt the way he did, I would have never done that to him. Ever. I pride myself on being honest and open, and unfortunately have a strong moral complex. I am incapable of behaving the way he did, so I struggle to understand. It's also just hard to wrap my head around the fact that, at end of the day, despite his reasonings, he did it because he wanted to, as every cheater does. Mostly, though, I feel a lot of shame for betraying my own values. I always promised myself that if I was disrespected like that by anyone, I would leave. But you never know until it happens to you. At the time it happened, I seriously had no self-worth or self-respect, and just needed somebody. Now that I am in a good place with myself, a perk of my frontal lobe beginning to develop, I hate the decision I made back then. I wish I had just been a little stronger and stood up for myself and left. I don't enjoy some aspects of the person I have become as a result of his actions, someone who is controlling and petty and angry at their worst. I used to be unabashedly happy. I love myself, but am struggling to move past that guilt and shame and all those ugly feelings. Truly, I have no problems with our relationship now, and I actually love what we have going on when I don't factor this in. It is fresh and fun, and we have definitely rebuilt into something sustainable long-term. I've done a lot of inner work. I am my own person now with friends I love, a great job, and hobbies I like. I love being by myself and enjoy my own company, but I guess I sometimes fear never finding love again, as I don't actively pursue romantic relationships. The simple fact is that I enjoy having him as an addition to my life, and he is no longer my whole identity, as I mistakenly let him be at the start. We are not too intertwined, so leaving is not that inconvenient aside from the fact I'd be sad. We live together, but I can afford this place on my own. We have no kids, and never will, as I do not want to be a mother, and no pets. Dinks, if you will. I feel like I am at a crossroads, and there is always that nagging in the back of my mind about it. The hypervigilance is exhausting. I don't think I will ever fully forgive or forget this situation, cause why the fuck would someone do that? As I see people moving into marriage talks, it just makes me wonder if this someone I could truly spend the rest of my life with, knowing what he has done. This is an internal battle I am constantly facing, and I am just tired. Also, I know that statistically speaking, our odds aren't great, and I don't enjoy gambling. So do I give up on someone who made a terrible series of choices and continues to wholeheartedly correct their wrong? Can people actually change? Is this relationship actually sustainable with a cracked foundation like that? Or do I move on from this and potentially live with the devil I don't know? Story 2 TL, and boy is this a long one. My fiancée, 29F at the time, cheated on me, 30 million at the time, with her ex on my birthday. And were it not for the 2 amazing kids we subsequently had together later, I'd question why I ever got back together with her. Because that hurt still lingers more than 2 decades later. Quite a few years ago, I got engaged to a woman I was head over heels in love with. We'd been dating for 2 years, lived together, and our lives seemed to be heading in the same trajectory. I proposed on the 8th of August because the number 8 was my girlfriend's favorite number. All was seemingly good, and as far as I knew, she was as excited at the prospect of marriage as I was. But before I go further, a little backstory. We met almost 3 years earlier through a mutual friend, let's call him Bob, she was dating at the time. My band was playing with another band that Bob liked, so naturally he dragged his girlfriend along. Bob introduced me to her and said, "You two talk, I've got to go see someone." I thought she was cute, funny, and wondered why she was dating such a transparently awful guy who had a reputation as someone whose only goal in life was to bed as many women as possible. The night ended, and I assumed I'd never see her again, and honestly didn't think too much about our encounter. I didn't even mention her in a diary I kept at the time. She was Bob's girlfriend anyway. She'd probably get tossed to the wayside soon enough, and will have been nothing more than a random memory that inexplicably pops into your head when you're doing the dishes 30 years later, if at all. Fast forward a few months later, and I was at a club with some friends, and Bob was there. He came up to me and asked if I remembered his girlfriend. I said I did, and he said that they'd broken up but were still friends, and she'd come to the club with him and other mutual friends, and she'd love to chat with me, but she was shy, so I should go over to her and initiate things. I put aside my own self-doubt, walked over to her, and struck up conversation. She was drunk but still very sweet, incredibly beautiful, wickedly witty, and quite flirty. We exchanged email addresses and began conversing. Emails turned into phone calls, and after 3 months I summoned up the courage to ask her out on a date. We shared our first kiss 6 months to the day we first met. We spent the entire weekend together, and I fell head over heels in love. I wasn't to know until much later that she was confused about her failings and met up with another former boyfriend of hers and slept with him a week after that first kiss. But that's not what this story's about. For the record, it still hurt when I eventually found out, but it didn't devastate me or affect our relationship. Fast forward to 2 years later, August 8. We talked about marriage, and I thought she was utterly in love with me. So I secretly bought the ring she nonchalantly admired as we were randomly passing a jewelry store a few weeks earlier. On August 8 of that year, I proposed. She was shocked, and I assumed it was a good shock. A conversation much later revealed she actually went into a panic and began questioning what it was she wanted out of our relationship. I was oblivious. Utterly besotted and as completely smitten then as I was on our first date, I assumed she felt the same about me. She didn't. Just over a week later, she received a phone call from Bob. His mother had killed herself and he'd just found her. I drove her to Bob's mum's house and sat in the car while she and a few university friends of hers and Bob's comforted him out on the street. I saw the way she hugged him and it made me feel uneasy. There was warmth there. I dismissed it as her just expressing her empathy and that I shouldn't read anything into it. After 5 or so minutes of her and the mutual uni friends of Bob milling about on the street, with Bob clearly distraught, she came up to me at the car and said I should go home. She'd get a lift back with someone else. As I drove back to our house, I felt like I'd lost something. It was a strange sensation. My fiancé's panic and confusion after the proposal clearly made things weird the week following the proposal. She obviously tried to hide it, but I could sense something was amiss. And seeing her hug Bob deflated me just that little bit more. Bob's mum's funeral was scheduled for the 22nd, my birthday. My fiancé had spent vast portions of the week prior helping Bob with funeral plans, cleaning out Bob's mum's house and generally comforting him. She's a highly empathetic soul, and despite Bob generally being a shitty boyfriend, she and Bob still had a close friendship. So I understood and assumed it was her just being a good friend. The 22nd came and my fiancé arrived home from uni early, got changed, and left for the funeral 15 minutes later. She called me afterwards and said she and a bunch of her uni mates were going to Bob's place for a few drinks. She wouldn't be too long and she'd come home and take me out to dinner or something for my birthday. So I pottered around and enjoyed having the house to myself. 6 p.m. passed, no fiancé. 7 p.m., 8 p.m. At around 9 p.m. I figured dinner wasn't happening, so I made myself something to eat and watched a movie. The movie ended. Still no fiancé. I began getting worried. Midnight passed and I'd spent my birthday alone. At 3 a.m. I called her. I have no idea why I waited so long. She answered the phone and sounded strange, like she'd been asleep, or trying not to let people around her hear her conversation. She said she'd had won too many drinks and couldn't drive home and tried to sleep it off. I told her I could have picked her up. She said she'd be home soon. About half an hour later, she walked through the door, apologized for not doing something for my birthday, jumped in the shower, then went straight to bed. I was so incredibly sad, so incredibly hurt. Almost immediately, her behavior changed. There was a palpable distance between us, and such an awkward reaction from her any time I attempted to show any affection. I distinctly recall being sad at band rehearsal a few days after the funeral and telling my bandmates something was weird between my fiancé and I ever since my birthday. Once again, I dismissed it as just me overthinking things. She'd just been through a turbulent few weeks and it was bound to affect her mental state. 6 days after my birthday, she woke me up before she headed off to uni. She was in tears. I immediately tried to comfort her and asked her what was wrong. She said Bob kissed her that night, my birthday, and that she had kissed him back. My heart sank. In those brief, hazy moments, I tried to rationalize it. It was fucked, but it was just a kiss. Rationalizing didn't work. I got angry and told her to get the fuck away from me. She left for uni still in tears. After the anger subsided, a new feeling of hurt I'd never felt before began to overwhelm me. I sobbed like I'd never sobbed before. I'd had my heart broken in the past, but this was so much worse. She kissed him back. We broke up. It was her decision. I wanted to try work through it. It was just a kiss. Her mind was made up, though. The next month or so was awful. I moved out. She began dating Bob again because she owed it to herself to see if there was something there with Bob. There were angry, hurtful texts, nasty phone calls, and I said and did a lot of things I'm ashamed of. But I felt it nothing compared to the devastating texts from Bob in return that gleefully targeted my insecurities, which my ex had clearly mentioned to him at some point. But deep down I knew Bob was a shit guy, and he'd revert back to the same shit guy he was when he and my ex first dated. So I began to let go. Bob would inevitably cheat on her or fuck her around in some other way. He had form, a leopard can't change its spots. I moved in with some friends and started enjoying my life. Had some wonderful encounters with great and beautiful people, got a job I absolutely loved, and even started being somewhat of a comfort to my ex when Bob inevitably turned back into the shit bloke he'd always been. Because leopards and spots, my ex saw the change in me and asked if we could meet up for a chat. Sure, I said. She said I probably wouldn't like hearing certain things she wanted to tell me. I was fine, though. I was so much stronger, so much more comfortable with who I was and the future I looked forward to. So we met up at a little park near the first little flat we moved into together. She told me that she slept with Bob that night. I kind of expected that's what she'd tell me, so I thought I was prepared for it. I wasn't. I don't believe in souls, but at that moment I felt whatever manifests itself as a soul physically sink. I put on a brave face and told her it's what I expected to hear. We talked a bit more, hugged, and said our goodbyes. I walked home shattered. I sank into a deep depression, and a few days later, at my lowest ebb, I popped out every tab of paracetamol packet I had, popped them in my mouth, and washed it down with half a bottle of vodka. As the affects began kicking in, probably more so the alcohol than the pills, I began thinking this was a dumb move. I called my sister, who's a nurse, and asked what's the worst that can happen after what I'd just done. She raced over and took me to the hospital. Luckily, I'd vomited most of the stuff out before my sister arrived, so I walked away from the hospital the next morning with a relatively clean bill of health and a referral to see a psychologist. I was still devastated, but I got better. I pushed the hurt aside again, though never actively dealing with it, and began moving on and somewhat enjoying life once more. My ex and I began regularly communicating, and we ended up getting back together. I approached the second phase of our relationship with a lot of trepidation, and recall writing in my diary at the time that I wasn't sure it was a good idea. Knowing that she felt more obligated to see if a second shot with Bob would work rather than trying to repair the relationship with the man she was engaged to, hung heavily in my mind. I wasn't convinced she was in love with me. I felt like her second choice, the one she settled for, but we forged ahead. I quit my job, the best job I've ever had, which did wonders for my mental health at the time, and we moved interstate for her career. I was in love and wanted to be with her, so it didn't seem that hard a choice to leave our old city behind and try make a go of another one. We were there for 6 months. Her career wasn't panning out as well as she had hoped, so we began trying for a child. Turns out we're both ridiculously fertile, so she got pregnant straight away. We moved back to our hometown just after I'd been offered another dream job so we could be around family for our first child. A little over a year later, our son was born. 4 years later, we had a daughter. They were and still are our world. Nothing will ever change that. A couple of years after our second child, she became Facebook and Instagram friends with Bob. I expressed how hurtful that was and asked her to defriend him. She told me I was being silly. Essentially, you got the girl, so what are you worried about? But she did, eventually, and far more reluctantly than I would have liked. But not before sending Bob a message telling him the unfriending wasn't personal. I was overreacting to their friendship, that she still cared about him, and how he'd always have a place in her heart. Bob's response was far more respectful to my feelings than my partner's. He said he understood and that he'd probably feel the same as me were the tables turned. Side note: it's important to know that I never monitored or pried into my partner's private messages. Not on her laptop, not on her phone, not even a glance at her diary. I implicitly trusted her despite her history, and always felt it was healthy to have safe areas where one could vent frustrations or talk through issues, etc. with trusted friends. On this occasion, I borrowed her laptop for something, and it just so happened to open up on Messenger. I saw a recent message thread with Bob. Curiosity got the better of me. I confronted her about it, and once again I was made to feel like I overreacted. In hindsight, it was another nail in the ever-increasing ceiling of the coffin that contained our relationship. We fought on, nevertheless, trying to build our lives together as partners and parents. We had many ups and downs, separated a few times, had far too fleeting periods of deep adoration for each other. But ultimately, it was never going to work. We began counseling last year, and at a session in February this year, I had a moment of clarity when we were asked who we thought was more into the other person. I answered that I was definitely more into her than she was into me. She agreed without hesitation. My heart sank again, and I realized that that was the case for the majority of our relationship. A few weeks after that session, my partner and I had a chat. She told me that she didn't see a future with me. I'm grateful she did, because I'm far too gutless. I didn't fight it at all. It's been 2 months and it's all still a bit raw. I've moved out and it's given me time, because there's fuck all else to do when I get home from work, to reflect on our nearly quarter-of-a-century relationship. I'm still deeply hurt by being cheated on over 20 years ago. To this day, my birthday is the saddest day of the year, because it reminds me of the day of Bob's mum's funeral and how lonely I felt. Knowing that my fiancé was in bed with another man that night only exacerbates that loneliness and feeling of worthlessness. And there were so few birthdays after that where she made an effort to make it a special day for me. I should have walked away back then, 20-odd years ago, when I was in a better place and not convinced of her love for me. I should never have tried to rekindle what we once had. But I look at our 2 children and hate myself for thinking those thoughts, because she is an amazing mother. And like I said, those 2 kids are our world. I couldn't imagine my life without them in it, and I really am grateful I didn't walk away back then. For them, only them. But given my time again, not knowing the 2 utterly adored kids I share with her would exist, I would walk away. By now, I'd have found love with another, with someone as into me as I am into them. And we probably would have had kids just as adored and amazing as the ones I have now. And I probably wouldn't be regularly reminded of the betrayal that's hung like a cumulonimbus above me for 2 decades. I'm sure she'd have things to say about things I did or didn't do that drove a wedge between us. But it's me that's been more hurt by her than she's been by me. Nevertheless, I hope she finds happiness with a new love. I just pray that it's not Bob or a Bob clone, and that I find happiness in a new love long before she does. Because it would break me again if she gets there first.